And now I'd like to welcome Ebony Amelgu, Manager of Dallas North Transmission Operations, Cesar Ramirez, Manager of Metro West Transmission Operations, Scott Lewis, Manager of Distribution for the NTN District, Cade Winters, Manager of West Texas Distribution Operations, and Jesse Perez, Manager of Waco Transmission Operations. At Encore, we always start with safety, so that's where I'd like to start our conversation today and talk about how COVID has impacted our safety processes. I'm going to start with Cesar. Cesar, could you tell me how your organization has developed technology to ensure every employee can access safety meetings and training?
Sure. I guess, good morning. The best example that I can think of was the deployment of iPads for our crews. The idea behind it was that we wanted to keep our safety meetings going, especially during 2020, which was really something different. The deployment of the iPads was something that we had already done with some of our crews, so adding a couple of more wasn't really that much work. So the crews have been able to, again, participate during safety meetings remotely while keeping social distance guidelines in place. In addition to that, we've been able to use those iPads for training, whether it's local or company-wide. And they've used the iPads as well for daily work. They've used them for research. They've used them to do email, read email, send notes, etc. So overall, it's been a very successful program.
Very cool. And you also had a pretty innovative process for performing socially distanced driving observations in your area. Could you tell us about the two-way dash cam process?
Sure. I'm going to start off by giving credit where credit is due. I believe the metering group and distribution were the first ones to deploy this program. We were just, mimicking what they did. Very inexpensive way to continue to monitor our drivers. We have a lot of young employees, so it's very important for us to be able to provide feedback in that area. So the cameras again are very inexpensive. They're easy to deploy. We set it up inside the vehicle, and all it does is basically record the driver, the wheel, and the road ahead. So after the video is recorded, our safety rep will look at it and we'll take notes, and any feedback is shared with the employees. Again, all this is done because we want to keep our social distance guidelines. So, excuse me. So again, overall, it's been a very successful program. We want to expand it a little bit more if we could in the future. So we're hoping that we're able to continue this method of doing some oversight.
Great. Thank you so much, Cesar. I'm going to go over to Scott. Scott, distribution has had to adjust to a new way of working, of course, as well. Could you explain the new processes that are in place for our Encore distribution crews to continue to work safely and keep the lights on for our customers?
Yeah, Brittany, so I think a couple things come to mind. I think one is vehicles. We've only allowed one rider per vehicle. So, to allow for that, we've the transportation team got us a bunch of rental vehicles to allow us to do that. And then also some of our partners in design or right of way where their people were working remotely, didn't need a vehicle as much as they normally would, have loaned us some vehicles to share with our crews to allow us to, keep one rider per vehicle. And that's really just to, limit that exposure. Even though the crews are working together daily, we're trying to keep them separated. Really, that helps us keep them separated and reduce that prolonged exposure, right, of riding in a vehicle together. So that's one thing. I think another thing that comes to mind is a crew sharing or different crew members or crew members from different crews working together. We avoided that at the first at all costs. We just did not do it. There's times when you're on call, someone gets sick, or particularly during this time, Someone may have been restricted for COVID reasons and they're on call. And so we would someone would, volunteer to take calls with that crew, and we haven't done that. Just that crew would either just have to step up and take calls with less people, or we had to, maybe get a crew from another district to come in or another service center to help them if they had a job too big for a limited number of people. So that's a couple things that come to mind that we've done to really change the way we've worked during COVID.
And just so our audience knows, that when we say we had to add more vehicles, I believe I heard in another session it was close to a number of like 400. So it was quite the undertaking to have to find so many vehicles to add to the system. And there's other companies that were looking to add vehicles as well. So it's really amazing that y'all remain so agile to try and get all those safety precautions in place. Something else that's changing is how we implement training. Can you tell us how our training has changed and how we're facilitating training in new ways?
Yeah, so a couple things there as well. So first is just our annual required trainings that we do. Normally we would do those in safety meetings at the service center. And much like everybody else, we're doing everything WebEx. So we've had to do all those annual required trainings like emergency evacuation, fire extinguishers, those things virtually, right? And the hard thing about that is actually it's required training, so we have to document everybody that's on the WebEx, who was there, capturing that information to send in to the learning center or whoever that, whatever that is now, I guess UltiPro, to capture that information. And then I think second also, we put a group together for our distribution lineman training. Progression of our younger linemen is important, right? So a team of managers, safety, and our training group kind of came together and developed some interim training solutions to get us through the pandemic time. Some of the things we did was we would allow an employee to progress with maybe not going to a instructor-led training. But there were a few trainings that we felt so important that were instructor-led that we couldn't do that with at the start of this. So those were, the distribution lineman training camp where they get their initial CPR training, forklift training, pole top rescue, those type things. We still had to do that, but we did it in a limited class size. We did a modified gloving course for those people that were going to start actually gloving performing energized primary work. And those were kind of done in-house with the crew supervisor, a supervisor, and then a member of either the training or safety group would watch these employees perform certain tasks to basically certify them where they could start working energized primary. So those are a few things we did. It was important that we allowed our employees to continue to receive the essential training they needed, and also to allow them to progress. We need them to progress, and then again, they also want to get those raises that they get when they progress. So it was important that we continued to do that.
Thank you, Scott. Some really great examples of innovation and remaining agile and in a different situation. Ebony, I'd like to talk to Ebony next. Ebony, progression training is also an essential process that had to be adjusted due to COVID. Could you explain first why progression training is really critical and how operations adjusted that progression training while working differently?
Yeah, absolutely. So progression training, kind of like what Scott alluded to earlier, is really important for our employees that are in the craft and the technician ranks. And it's typically we have established testing for our employees that in the past, before COVID, was held in person with, local management as well as an external manager, to provide a level set. And once COVID hit, we realized that, we can't hold up the progression of our employees. So it was imperative for us to quickly find a way to pivot and incorporate WebEx and other virtual instruments that would allow us to continue with progression training while adhering to our new COVID protocols. So essentially what we've been doing is, we've had a lot of our local management teams, we meet in person, and as long as we're adhering to our COVID protocols, and then we include our virtual counterparts for external districts via WebEx or phone calls or conference calls. It kind of evolved as we receive more tools, but we include them in that testing to make sure that, again, we're not holding our employees back and they're able to receive their raises as they complete the progression. Something else that we've done, and again, kind of piggybacking on what Scott just talked about, is our training. So once a year, we have some really big training sessions for our employees within transmission. Typically, it's craft training, technician training, diagnostic tester training, and patrolman training. And one of the things that the first one out of the gate was our DTT, diagnostic tester training. So that occurred in June, July timeframe, and they quickly, realized that we couldn't postpone training. We have a lot of information that we need to share. We have a lot of employees that are newer to transmission operations, and we just didn't want to forego a whole year of training. So they incorporated some really creative ways of doing engaging training in June by incorporating WebEx, but they were creative in how it wasn't just a normal WebEx presentation. It was kind of a hybrid. We had some people in-house in small conference or larger conference rooms, a small group of people, but we also had a virtual session so we could communicate to the presenters. We could ask questions in Q&A so that we had to dialogue back and forth, but at the same time, it was we were able to continue with our training and get that accomplished.
Thank you so much, Ebony. I'm going to go over to Cade Winters. Cade, could you tell us a little bit about how the way you've managed storms has changed?
Sure. Thank you, Brittany. Yeah, certainly in the middle, this is an opportune time to talk about this. As everybody knows, we've just gotten over one of the biggest winter storms that this company has probably seen in its existence. And first of all, I'd just like to say thank you to everybody that helped supported that effort. I mean, across the company, it takes all of us to manage such a huge storm and all the moving pieces of that. So one thing that this company does extremely well, in my opinion, is storm restoration, and that was very evident in this almost 2-week long winter event that we had. But yeah, we've definitely had to change some of the things we do, and that's not just unique to the storm. Scott mentioned a lot of things that we're doing differently as a whole, and so we carry those things through in a storm event. But we have to be very strategic, and at least here in West Texas, we've done our best through this. I mean, it's almost, I guess, the 15th, it'll be a year that we've been operating under these pandemic restrictions. And that's pretty crazy. But, we've sent all of our non-essential folks wherever possible to work remotely and things like that. And so we really tried to limit the exposure, even in a storm situation, and trying to go as long as we can without formally opening our storm desks. So we've done that in certain storms where we've had folks working remotely, either in their own service center or even from home. Unfortunately, this most recent storm was significant enough that just really wasn't entirely possible. So we were able to keep some folks working remotely, but when you talk about having your storm center open for, a week and a half or almost 2 weeks, it really takes a lot of coordinated effort and things like that. And so we did bring folks in, sort of a shell crew into our storm room, and we separated folks. We put some groups in a conference room and some groups in our storm room, and some groups in, remotely, and to kind of minimize the amount of exposure we had. And of course, there's all the pandemic guidelines that we follow from, masks and screening and all that kind of stuff. We had multiple shifts throughout that event, so we would stagger when folks would come in, not just the field resources who were working out in the field. We would have, kind of them coming in 12-hour blocks, but we did the same thing with our storm desk, and kind of in that transition between one group leaving and one group coming in, we'd send most everybody home a little bit early so we didn't have all that traffic as we were kind of doing a shift change. But just there's so many nuances that some of them were kind of unexpected. We had challenges getting food in the first few days with the rolling blackouts and things like that. So we had to, getting food for a group that's there around the clock. You got to get everybody individual boxed meal type things. And when that wasn't available, we were, getting TV dinners and stuff. So I appreciate my folks tolerating that through a long storm. And we even had to call in our cleaning lady and made her a full-time employee at the service center to just work around the clock with us. And, a lot of different things, but it was challenging, but I think, again, our folks really stood up and did a great job in that, given all the opportunities we had there.
Yeah, it sounds like a testament just to how hard everybody worked in the past 2 weeks, from our linemen to our SCCs to the dispatchers and the working in the storm center. You also have a unique challenge in West Texas. So could you tell us a little bit about some of the challenges you might face out in West Texas that are a little different than other regions at Encore?
Well, I think we all have the same major challenges. One thing that may be different about us in West Texas is just the sheer amount of real estate that we cover, and we may not be as dense in customer counts, but from a geographic perspective, we're spread out over a huge area. Probably if you look at our kind of east to west, you're talking about 300 miles, and some of that on the far west side is extremely remote. So it's certainly, in this last storm, we have an opportunity, kind of our most furthest west feeder, which is served out of Culberson Wind, certainly had its share of some damage from the ice storm and stuff. So, that's about a 3-hour trip to get there from the Odessa Service Center, and it's not a direct by any means, and there's a lot of rough terrain and very remote areas when you send in a troubleshooter out to patrol those facilities. And we actually got some pretty significant damage to that. But if you can imagine, if it takes 3 hours to get there, and then however long it takes to troubleshoot, and then come back, and then now a repair crew has to get material and make that same trip. And so it's certainly challenging. And, with all the weather too that we had, fuel became an opportunity, I guess would be a good way to say it. In some of these more remote areas, there's just no place to get fuel. And for those in operations, you probably recognize that some of our larger vehicles burn a lot of fuel and fairly quickly. And so that was somewhat challenging. And we had a couple of tense moments with guys coming back to service center on fumes, kind of thing. And of course, in those remote areas, you have challenges with communication, getting good cell phone reception and such. So a lot of times guys have to go do their work and then come out to drive, 20 or 30 miles so they can make a call to the supervisor or something, or convey some important information back. But, we accept that and realize that's a part of doing business out here, and our guys are very resilient, and it doesn't bother them. They just take care of business, and I'm very proud of that. But yeah, we definitely have some very remote areas. We have some long feeders that have fairly small conductor, and which is very susceptible to the ice and things that you see in these storms. But we all face our challenges, and we've got some unique things out here, and a lot of oil field customers. And you can imagine when you get a bunch of snow and ice and things, and nobody's out traveling, that those oil field roads are sort of hard to identify and things like that. But we really rely on the tribal knowledge of the folks that have been out here for a long time, and our troubleshooters to give us good instructions on how to get back to a particular site when we need to make repairs and things like that. And most people would probably laugh at some of the comments and the directions. They reference various landmarks and livestock and things like that, but our folks get it, and they know what's going on. So but yeah, just again, kudos to everybody and across the system, from the boardroom to the bucket to the control room and everywhere in between. I'm so proud to be a part of this company, and seeing the service that everybody provides. So
Thank you so much, Kay. Having been out to West Texas, I did not realize the importance of GPS coordinates until I went down there. We definitely appreciate everything y'all have done during the storm, everyone on this call. I'd like to talk next, last but not least, to Jesse. Jesse, communication has changed as evidenced on our WebEx call this morning. Normally we would be in person, but we've got lots of different tools that we've been using to stay connected. Could you tell us a little bit about how you continue to communicate with your organization, what tools you're using?
Sure, Brittany. So just as the other presenters have alluded to, these days we rely heavily on technology to maintain effective communication. We're using mobile phones, laptops, iPads, using those devices more than ever these days to make phone calls, text one another, video conferencing, those type of things and tools are helping us maintain effective communication at this time. WebEx and other video platforms are definitely benefiting us at this time with the, being able to gather like we once used to is no longer. So the use of the WebExes or Zooms or whatever video platform you're using helps to maintain face-to-face communication the best we can. And a lot of us are still adjusting. Some of us use it more than others, so we do have our difficulties with speaking while muting or having the video off or on when it shouldn't be. But we're all facing those challenges at this time. But it is the best we have right now for face-to-face, so I think we're all utilizing it the best we can. We've also, just like others have talked about with the trainings, we currently have new employee safety orientation coming up for transmission. We have recruiting going on, again, with the training and other safety meetings. Again, with no gatherings, we're still adjusting to how we're administering these, but again, video platform is the best way. So right now, after a year, like Cade mentioned earlier, it's starting to become the new normal. So just like what we're on now, we're all getting used to it, but it's slowly becoming the new normal.
Yeah, I think we joked that the catchphrase of 2020 was "you're on mute." I've got some questions coming in with the time we have left. I think what you just stated really works well into this first question. Do you think people are getting the same benefit from this new way of training? Have you seen it? Does it seem effective doing virtual training? Are there aspects that you think might be beneficial moving forward even after the pandemic has ended?
I'll answer that one. So I think it is effective, but it has to be in spurts. An all-day affair of WebEx or another video platform is just not the way to go. I know some of our training that is usually like a day long has been condensed down to about 1.5 to 2 hours, just because the fact that you can only pay attention to video for so long before you start losing interest or your mind starts wandering. So it can be effective. You just have to adjust the way things are done now compared to what they were pre-pandemic. So.
Thank you. Our next question, can someone talk about how our field employees are doing as far as feeling safe and supported by Encore and each other? Are employees talking about their experiences and maybe more of kind of the mental strain that some of these measures have taken in working different?
I'll take a stab at that. As far as field employees go, certainly they've had to make some adjustments, and Scott talked a lot about those. And I think we all have stressors associated with just the general way we're having to adapt our lives and our careers and our jobs and all that stuff. But my personal, I guess, opinion and what I've seen from our folks is the field resources are very resilient, and it's a brotherhood, a family, and although we've made a lot of changes to things, they've adapted to them, and have just really stood up and done a great job. It's something we got to be mindful as leaders and things like that, is to really constantly communicate, look for things with folks, and I know several of our folks during this recent winter storm, they were coming in and working long hours, and they didn't have power at their house, and they might have had broken pipes and things like that. And it's just a testament to how, what these guys think about the importance of their role, that they kind of, put that aside and continue to come in and take care of business. And of course, we work with them to give them opportunities to get those things resolved as well. But I think in general, our folks are just, they want this thing to be over, but they've adapted well to it.
Yeah, Brittany, I would add to that also. I think we try and listen to our employees, right? And they give us feedback, whether it's the top neck gaiter they're wearing or face masks that they're having to wear. We try and provide them what works. And I alluded to, the on-call situations where we weren't sharing crews. We've, to this point, we've relaxed that a little bit to where we can share different crew members. There's just some guidelines around that. You can only, if a person works with another crew today, he can't go and share with another crew or work with another crew for 7 days, to limit those exposures. Some things we've had to relax and adjust over time by listening to the employees. So.
Y'all mentioned a few things about how we're working different and some of the tools we're using. Do you think any of these things will stay in place? Are we going to be meeting in WebEx even after this starts to wind down?
I can take that.
Yeah, I believe. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Caesar.
Well, I'm just mentioning, I believe there's a place for iPads and web access to take, to make a difference. I think overall, you cannot replace the face-to-face, the handshakes, the visual, right? So I believe there's a place for some things to stay, but I think overall, everybody, and I speak for everybody, I think mostly everybody wants to go back to the old times. If we want to talk about that in those terms, right, where you were able to drive with somebody next to you, you were able to communicate face to face, shake hands, etc. So that's my point of view.
Ebony, do you want to add to that?
I think Caesar covered it. He said pretty much the same thing I was going to say. There's a time and place for some of these new tools. So I think we can just be creative in how we implement them, but it's also, I think it's important to have those face-to-face meetings and those face-to-face interactions as well.
Our next question is, how are the different districts or even organizations sharing your challenges and successes happening across Encore?
So I'll take that. So, we still have our virtual staff meetings with our directors, and so that's a good avenue to share any successes or any challenges. I know a lot of the district managers are in various group text. So I mean that was going on before this whole pandemic to begin with. So we talk about things via messaging services. So we still share a lot of information through our staff meetings, and then we take that information from our staff meetings and we bring it back to our internal district supervisor manager teams and talk about the information either through our own staff meetings or in safety meetings with our groups.
Last question. So we've all had challenges you've expressed challenges within your organizations, but personally, what's the biggest challenge each of you have had? And that can be, working at home with 3 kids, trying to homeschool, or, something within your organization. What have you found most challenging?
Brittany, let me start off. I think, working from home has been a challenge, I think, for everyone. The one thing that I miss is actually dealing with the employees one-on-one. One of the things that we didn't stop doing was hiring. We continue to hire, right? Attrition takes place each and every day. So getting to know the employee one-on-one, getting to talk to them one-on-one, having that open door policy, right? Where at any moment, anytime, any place, you can meet with them, talk about their concerns, talk about safety. Those are the things that I miss, and I'm sure that I speak for a lot of managers that not having that interaction, the one-on-one, the shaking hands, the getting to meet those people, their families, etc. I think that's been something that has been different, and hopefully we can get rid of that sooner rather than later.
I'm sure most of you share Caesar's sentiments. Does anybody else want to add?
I would say my biggest challenge is being remote, or everyone working differently, I guess, is moving to a new district and trying to learn the 50 or so employees that are working at this office. In the past, you would have a safety meeting, you would see everybody, and you see people around the office more often. But working differently, I rarely see the guys in the office. So it's a challenge, and it's something that I've had to be proactive on, and going out into the site to actually meet the guys and not just talk to them virtually via our safety calls.
Well, I think that's all the questions we had for today. You've expressed a lot of challenges you guys have faced in operations, but it seems like you have really overcome them through a lot of innovative solutions and processes. We just want to express our gratitude for y'all joining us today. I know you're very busy and your employees are very busy. Thank you to all of our field employees that were able to log in today. We are very excited to see what comes next, and hopefully this pandemic will let us to start to wind down, allow us to be in the same room again soon. A few things before I let you guys go. If you'd like to review a recording of the session, I know some weren't able to join the live session. We'll have those available in the next few days on the Innovation Week website. You can find those under the Schedule tab. We also want to congratulate yesterday's prize winners. Congratulations if you are on the live session today, you are entered to win a prize. So we're giving away some really cool things like Yetis, TVs. So if you continue to register for events, you'll be entered for those prizes. You can also go to the Innovation Week website and click on our sponsors tab at the top to watch a message from Debbie Dennis about how working differently has impacted Encore, and we encourage you to do that. Again, thank you so much for joining this session today. We look forward to seeing you in the next one coming up in just a bit. So thank you guys so much for joining.